scrotum. In the female, it accompanies the round ligament of the uterus and is lost upon it. The lumbo-inguinal nerve (Nervus lumbo-inguinalis) femoral or crural branch of genitofemoral descends on the external iliac artery, sending a few filaments around it, and, passing beneath the inguinal ligament, enters the sheath of the femoral vessels, lying superficial and lateral to the femoral artery. It pierces the anterior layer of the sheath of the vessels and the fascia lata, and supplies the skin of the anterior surface of the upper part of the thigh. On the front of the thigh it communicates with the anterior cutaneous branches of the femoral nerve. A few filaments from the lumbo-inguinal nerve may be traced to the femoral artery. The lateral femoral cutaneous nerve (Nervus cutaneus femoralis lateralis), external cutaneous nerve, arises from the dorsal divisions of the second and third lumbar nerves. It emerges from the lateral border of the psoas major about its middle, and crosses the iliacus obliquely toward the anterior superior iliac spine. It then passes under the inguinal ligament and over the sartorius muscle into the thigh, where it divides into two branches, an anterior and a posterior. The anterior branch becomes superficial about 10 cm below the inguinal ligament, and divides into branches which are distributed to the skin of the anterior and lateral parts of the thigh, as far as the knee. The terminal filaments of this nerve frequently communicate with the anterior cutaneous branches of the femoral nerve, and with the infrapatellar branch of the saphenous nerve, forming with them the patellar plexus. The posterior branch pierces the fascia lata and subdivides into filaments which pass backward across the lateral and posterior surfaces of the thigh, supplying the skin from the level of the greatest trochanter to the middle of the thigh. The obturator nerve (Nervus obturatoris) arises from the ventral divisions of the second, third, and fourth lumbar nerves. The branch from the third is the largest, while that from the second is often very small. It descends through the fibers of the psoas major, and emerges from its medial border near the brim of the pelvis. It then passes behind the common iliac vessels, and on the lateral side of the hypogastric vessels and ureter, which separate it from the ureter, and runs along the lateral wall of the lesser pelvis, above and in front of the obturator vessels, to the upper part of the obturator foramen. Here it enters the thigh, and divides into an anterior and a posterior branch, which are separated at first by some of the fibers of the obturator externus, and lower down by the abductor brevis. The anterior branch, ramus anterior, leaves the pelvis in front of the obturator externus, and descends in front of the adductor brevis, and behind the pectineus and adductor longus. At the lower border of the latter muscle it communicates with the anterior cutaneous and saphenous branches of the femoral nerve, forming a kind of plexus. It then descends upon the femoral artery, to which it is finally distributed. Near the obturator foramen the nerve gives off an articular branch to the hip joint. Behind the pectineus it distributes branches to the adductor longus and gracilis, and usually to the adductor brevis, and in rare cases to the pectineus. It receives a communicating branch from the accessory obturator nerve when that nerve is present. Occasionally the communicating branch to the anterior cutaneous and saphenous branches of the femoral is continued down, as a cutaneous branch, to the thigh and leg. When this is so, it emerges from beneath the lower border of the adductor longus, descends along the posterior margin of the sartorius to the medial side of the knee, where it pierces the deep fascia, communicates with the saphenous nerve, and is distributed to the skin of the tibial side of the leg as low down as its middle. The posterior branch, ramus posterior, pierces the anterior part of the obturator externus and supplies this muscle. It then passes behind the adductor brevis on the front of the adductor magnus, where it divides into numerous muscular branches which are distributed to the adductor magnus and the adductor brevis when the latter does not receive a branch from the anterior division of the nerve. It usually gives off an articular filament to the knee joint. The articular branch for the knee joint is sometimes absent. It either perforates the lower part of the adductor magnus or passes through the opening which transmits the femoral artery, and enters the popliteal fossa. It then descends upon the popliteal artery as far as the back part of the knee joint, where it perforates the oblique popliteal ligament and is distributed to the synovial membrane. It gives filaments to the popliteal artery. The accessory obturator nerve, nervus obturatorius accessorius, is present in about 29% of cases. It is of small size and arises from the ventral divisions of the third and fourth lumbar nerves. It descends along the medial border of the psoas major, crosses the superior ramus of the pubis, and passes under the pectineus, where it divides into numerous branches. One of these supplies the pectineus, penetrating its deep surface. Another is distributed to the hip joint, while a third communicates with the anterior branch of the obturator nerve. Occasionally, the accessory obturator nerve is very small and is lost in the capsule of the hip joint. When it is absent, the hip joint receives two branches from the obturator nerve. The femoral nerve, nervus femoralis, anterior crural nerve. The largest branch of the lumbar plexus arises from the dorsal divisions of the second, third, and fourth lumbar nerves. It descends through the fibers of the psoas major, emerging from the muscle at the lower part of its lateral border, and passes down between it and the iliacus, behind the iliac fascia. It then runs beneath the inguinal ligament into the thigh, and splits into an anterior and a posterior division. Under the inguinal ligament it is separated from the femoral artery by a portion of the psoas major. Within the abdomen the femoral nerve gives off small branches to the iliacus, and a branch which is distributed upon the upper part of the femoral artery. The latter branch may arise in the thigh. In the thigh, the anterior division of the femoral nerve gives off anterior cutaneous and muscular branches. The anterior cutaneous branches comprise the intermediate and medial cutaneous nerves. The intermediate cutaneous nerve, ramus cutaneous anterior, middle cutaneous nerve, pierces the fascia lata, and generally the sartorius, about 7.5 centimeters below the inguinal ligament, and divides into two branches which descend in immediate proximity along the forepart of the thigh, to supply the skin as low as the front of the knee. Here they communicate with the medial cutaneous nerve and the infrapatellar branch of the saphenous to form the patellar plexus. In the upper part of the thigh, the lateral branch of the intermediate cutaneous communicates with the lumboinguinal branch of the genitofemoral nerve. The medial cutaneous nerve, ramus cutaneous anterior, internal cutaneous nerve, passes obliquely across the upper part of the sheath of the femoral artery and divides in front, or at the medial side of that vessel, into two branches, an anterior and a posterior. The anterior branch runs downward on the sartorius, perforates the fascia lata at the lower third of the thigh, and divides into two branches. One supplies the integument as low down as the medial side of the knee. The other crosses to the lateral side of the patella, communicating in its course with the infrapatellar branch of the saphenous nerve. The posterior branch descends along the medial border of the sartorius muscle to the knee, where it pierces the fascia lata, communicates with the saphenous nerve, and gives off several cutaneous branches. It then passes down to supply the